So in November and December of 2021, I spent 3 weeks traveling around the stunning country that is Turkey. And in today's video, I'm going to be sharing 10 travel tips with you guys to help your experience in Turkey be much easier and much more enjoyable. So the first travel tip I'm going to share with you is something I wish I knew before I went, because I got caught out, and that is that booking.com does not work in Turkey. Now, basically, if you book any accommodation in advance, that will be fine. You'll be able to see it on your app when you get in the country. It's only when you actually go to search for new accommodation. So if you need to book places on the fly, if you're backpacking or just traveling around the country and you've not booked in advance, it will not show you any accommodation in the country. Now, there are workarounds with this. Of course, you can just get a VPN and then you are free to book accommodation as usual. But if you don't do so, when you go to search, you'll be like me and be shocked to find that when I searched for Istanbul to book somewhere, it was shown that there was no properties available, which was certainly a surprising thing to see. Obviously, if you are using different booking apps, you will be perfectly fine. And as I said, if you get a VPN, you can also have that as a workaround, and any bookings you've made before you enter Turkey will be perfectly fine. You'll be able to see them, you can cancel them, you can change the dates. It's just once you're in the country, you can't actually see any properties to book on booking.com. And my second tip is recommendations are absolutely key for traveling Turkey. And by recommendations, I mean by either people who have traveled the country or the locals themselves, as no one knows the country better than the locals. Now, the reason for this, it's kind of key in any country, but in Turkey, not all the information is up to date on Google online. So, for example, stuff like transportation, buses, trains, stuff like that, the timetables aren't 100% accurate, particularly with everything in the past couple of years with travel restrictions. Things change, the timetables are maybe running at a reduced frequency. So if you ask the locals, whether it be in hostels, hotels, whether it be people who work in cafes, they obviously know the up-to-date information on pretty much everything. There's places I hadn't even heard of before traveling to the country that when I was in Istanbul and speaking to the locals, they were telling me to go and visit, which I wish I knew many weeks beforehand, because I would have then been able to visit, but unfortunately I was actually leaving the country after Istanbul. So as I said, recommendations from either people who have traveled the country or preferably the locals who live there. As I said, no one knows the country better than them. And my third tip is Google Maps is not the best maps to use in the country, particularly if you're doing any hiking. I found out the hard way in Cappadocia. I thought I was on hiking trails and then it basically just leads you to a main road. Most of the hiking trails in the country aren't on the app, which you'll know from any other country really. There's different apps you can use for hiking, but more so the narrow streets, particularly in places like Antalya, in Fethiye, in Istanbul. Google Maps has an issue calibrating your exact location. It thinks you're on a different street or you're heading in a different direction. There's many times I was going completely the wrong way, only for Google Maps to tell me I needed to recalibrate, and then it would send me in the opposite direction. So maybe have a backup Maps app just in case Google Maps isn't working perfectly. And my next tip is to haggle on pretty much everything. Now, the reason I don't say everything is because certain things do have a fixed price. If you go to a restaurant or a cafe, if you go to Starbucks, these prices are fixed. Don't start haggling over them things. But if you go to somewhere where there's not a clear price tag on things, haggle over pretty much everything. The locals tend to enjoy it, and you'll know if they don't enjoy it and they have a fixed price, and then you can just pay that price. Most of the places I was haggling is with things like street food or markets for clothing. Particularly in Istanbul, one tip that I actually have is just to hang back and see what prices the locals are paying for things if it's a popular place. Also, that's just kind of a good tip in general. Eat where the locals eat. You'll have a much better experience in Turkey than if you just go off your instinct. Now, my next tip is do not skip Pamukkale. The amount of people who I met traveling Turkey who said, oh, we didn't go to Pamukkale because we didn't know if it was worth it, or whether it was accessible, or whether there's accommodation there. All of those questions I've answered in a video already. I'm going to leave it linked down below in the description. Check it out after this one. Pamukkale is absolutely worth visiting. It was one of the most stunning places I visited in the country itself. And in terms of accessibility, There's buses and trains that go to the nearby city, and then you can hop on a local bus 10-15 minutes on that and you are in Pamukkale. There's even some bus companies that do both day buses and overnight buses that drop you off in the town of Pamukkale, and there are lots of hotels at very, very good prices there. Tons of restaurants, tons of cafes. You can definitely visit Pamukkale and it is 100% worth it. Now my next tip is again one that I wish I knew beforehand, but it was actually someone who ran one of my favorite cafes in Cappadocia who put me onto this, and there is a website that tells you the day before whether the hot air balloons are going to be flying for the sunrise the following day. Now if you've seen any of my Cappadocia videos, you will know that unfortunately, despite spending 4 or 5 days there, they did not fly once, which was a bit of a shame because it's one of the main reasons people go to Cappadocia. Although I did enjoy exploring the nearby valleys, it would have been nice to have a hot air balloon ride or certainly experience it from afar, taking some photos. But if you wanted to plan in advance as to whether you think the hot air balloons are going to be flying, you can check out this website. I'm not even going to try and pronounce it. It'll be on screen now and in the description box below. And it tells you, as I said, the day before whether they're going to be flying. So if they are flying every day the week before you want to visit, good chances they're going to be flying when you visit. Now my next trip is more for people who are spending a longer time in the country, mainly backpackers, is plan at least a week for Istanbul. The city is so massive and there's so many different parts to explore, whether it be the European side or the Asian side. There are so many different things to explore in Istanbul, and you will probably never go down the same street twice, and you will experience something new everywhere you go. It was one of my favorite cities that I've traveled to in the world so far, which definitely surprised me because I don't usually like big, crowded, noisy cities, but Istanbul, definitely I've made an exception for. I absolutely love that place. Now my next tip is kind of a debatable one. It's overnight buses versus flying. Now I've taken many overnight buses, overnight trains in different parts of the world, and I usually love them. They're very cost efficient. You know, you get basically a night's accommodation and the transport to your next city in one, and you get to wake up in your new city or your new destination, which is always very useful because then you're not losing out on any traveling time. But in Turkey, I just could not hack the overnight bus. I took one from Izmir to Cappadocia. I believe it was like 11, 12 hours, something like that. And I hardly slept at all. The bus itself was really, really comfortable. It was quiet. It was full, but it was quiet. And obviously, pretty much I'd say everyone else on that bus had a good night's sleep. But for whatever reason, it wasn't even due to the driving or anything. As I said, the comfort was fine. I just could not sleep at all. I personally think because the bus made so many stops, it was literally stopping like every half an hour to drop people off and pick people up, I just wasn't sleeping great. I feel like I would doze off and then suddenly you're at a rest stop and they'd come over the microphone and announce that there was a rest, even though it was like 3 in the morning. So yeah, it was, for me, flying was the much better option, and the price between the two is very minimal. I paid, I believe, £12 or £11 for my overnight bus, and then I paid £15 or euros to fly from Cappadocia to Istanbul. So the cost difference was nothing. The only thing is you're kind of waiting around for a while in the airport, and then obviously you've got to get to and from the airport. But that's just a decision you can make based on your own personal preference. Now my next tip is a bit of a controversial one, but it is to skip over the big cities along the coast, meaning Antalya, Fethiye to some extent, and visit the smaller towns nearby. There's just so much better vibe going on there. You know, you get to really immerse yourself in the local culture. A lot of the locals are a lot more welcoming because they're very happy to see you exploring their town, that they don't get many tourists compared to, as I said, the nearby big cities. And you get to just, it's a lot more relaxing, it's a lot more authentic than visiting the bigger cities. You can visit the bigger cities elsewhere in the country. As I said, Istanbul is a great example. So when you're along the coast, try and get to the smaller towns. Unfortunately, I couldn't get to all of them because some of them were closed the time of the year that I was visiting, but the ones that I did get to explore were much more enjoyable than the bigger cities. And then finally, it will be a crime if you visited Turkey without enjoying the local food. You can enjoy your own food back home. So when you're in Turkey, try and eat where the locals eat, as I said earlier, but try the food that the locals enjoy as well. As I said, recommendations are key. Ask some of the locals what the best local cuisine is and try and get immersed in the Turkish tradition, the Turkish cuisine. It is definitely one of the best in Europe, so you've got to try some of the local Turkish food whilst traveling Turkey. That was my 10 Turkey travel tips for anyone hoping or planning on visiting the country in the near future. If you want to check out the rest of my Turkey travel videos, they will be linked on screen right now for the video playlist, and you can check it out in the description box below.